So who are you?
David Sachs, founder, CEO of Yammer.
Yeah. You guys are rock and rolling. Every time I come here, it seems like you've doubled in size of employees and probably customers too.
Yeah, when was the last time you were
6 months
here?
ago.
6 months ago? Okay.
8 months.
8 months. Yeah. So we
15
basically
years of internet time. Right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, lots changed. We basically went from 80 employees to 250 employees last year.
Yeah.
And now I think we're up like 300 employees or something like that.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about anyway? So there's a bunch of, I asked people on Twitter what they wanted to talk to the guy who runs Yammer about. I have my own, well, let's start with my theories and then go into the Yahoo stuff.
Right.
I have a theory that the social software industry is a lot like how our country was built out, right? In the early days, the West was unpopulated. There was nobody here, and we needed guys like you who were going to be risk takers to go, populate a plot of land, right? So we had the Homestead Act. And then as that built out, there was, some guys got lucky and were there, when gold was discovered, like John Sutter, right? And all of a sudden a city sprung up around him, and then there was competition. And I'm wondering if the homesteading era of social software is over now, and that now it's going to be, for guys like you to grow, you're going to have to take share away from other people, or is there still open land that hasn't been tapped yet?
Yeah, I mean, our theory, so we're I guess the territory we're going after is enterprise social networking. Yeah. So we started about 4 years ago with the idea or conviction that people would want to communicate at work in the same way they're communicating in their personal lives with the sort of social networking type interface, feed-based, profile-based communication. And so we brought that into companies as a private, secure solution. The market is huge. I mean, it's our view that every company will eventually have its own sort of private social network. Yeah. Plus, they may have multiple social networks. They may create collaboration spaces with their partners or customers and important external constituencies.
I just visited Dell, and there's a whole team that does nothing but social, and then they're trying to spread social out throughout the company, and they have these video dashboards. I call them data porn walls, where you walk in and they have everything said about Dell and everything said about their customers and everything said about their competition, and they have the team monitoring everything 24 hours a day. And I mean, that's the new social enterprise, right? And you guys are going after that space in a big way.
Yeah, so we do internal, which get all your employees together, and then we do sort of private external networks to talk to partners, customers, vendors, suppliers, consultants, whoever you want. The one thing we don't really do are kind of public forums. I feel like that whole space is moving onto Facebook anyway. It's sort of like, why create your own customer forum when you can just set up a Facebook page and that's where your customers are anyway. So you need to be monitoring what's happening on public social networks like Twitter or Facebook, but that's kind of a separate business, at least we think.
It integrates with because like people inside big companies need to see that data, and then they need to talk on Yammer.
Yeah, you can pull that stuff into Yammer. Yeah. So any Twitter feed can be brought into Yammer. You can bring in RSS feeds into Yammer and then have conversations about them. So we do actually that aspect of it. But our core business starts with kind of employee social networks and radiates outwards from there. But to your point of, is the land grab over, I'd say it's just really begun, because every company will eventually have an enterprise social network, and so even though we're
so it's not yet to the point where every company has one.
No, I mean, not by a long shot.
Really?
I mean, we have.
So my theory is too early.
Yeah, we'll eventually get there, but it's still pretty early. I think just in the last 6 months to a year, this idea has become more mainstream. I mean, when we first launched it, people looked at it very skeptically. That why would companies want a social network? Does that just mean their employees are socializing? They didn't really understand the business value as a new communication tool. And now we're getting there. Now we're starting to see companies create RFPs for this, going through a process. So
it can happen quite fast. I mean, inside Rackspace, I saw it fly through that company.
Yeah.
And then a committee got formed. The committee screwed it all up for you.
So if companies will listen to their employees, they will almost always choose Yammer. And
depends which. The problem was the sales team was on Salesforce, and they won.
Yeah. So one of the things we've done now is we actually will pull that chatter feed into Yammer so that there's not this stark choice anymore. The sales team can be in Salesforce, and those feeds can be pulled into Yammer, because you're going to have a lot of business feeds in a company, and every department's going to be lobbying for their tool. You really need something that spans across all of them, and that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah. So, so it's still the early days. You're still growing like a weed,
right? Yep.
And people are still getting convinced that social enterprise has something behind it. Where are your challenges right now? Is it just hiring people and getting good salespeople out there and
yeah, probably hiring is the biggest constraint on our growth, I would say. Both engineers and then salespeople are probably the two critical needs.
So you're probably focused on building a good company culture and making sure people are motivated and happy, and
I think so. Although
telling their friends that this is a cool place to work, all that fun
stuff. We do care a lot about those things. I don't know how consciously, like, we're spending our time saying, oh, we have to make Yammer like culture great, because it already is kind of is, but obviously that is something we care about a lot. We're on Yammer. Yammer's on Yammer constantly, so we have a very open, transparent culture. Everybody knows pretty much everything, and it's a very scrappy, startup-y type culture, more like a consumer internet company, even though we are going after the enterprise space.
Yeah. What makes it about Yammer that's more fun? Because I'm sort of missing it, because it was more fun than Chatter.
Fun?
Yeah. And to take it into another space, there's all Foursquare beat Gowalla because it was very subtly different, right? And
right.
Highlight is beating Glancy in this new space because it's very subtly different.
You mean on a product level?
Level, yeah.
So I think the difference is that Chatter is really an activity feed for record changes that are happening in Salesforce, and so the conversations tend to be about, you see like a story that a record changed, and you will reply to it and say, hey, why did this change? Why did the dollar amount change? Why did this opportunity go from won to lost, or open to lost, or something like that? It tends to be very transactional around, again, data objects in Salesforce, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different than what we do. We're creating something that's a much more open-ended collaboration tool, where, like in Yammer, you're much more likely to have conversations about just much more open type of questions, conversations, things like that. We'll pull that chatter feed into Yammer, like I said, but you can ask questions like, hey, who knows what's going on with this or this or this, or who has expertise in this area, or who knows the answer to this problem that I'm trying to solve. Things that aren't necessarily specifically related to a deal. Yeah. And so we find that Yammer is much better at having those types of conversations. We've hired a lot of people from Salesforce, and when they come over here, they tend to say things like, wow, I mean, like, this is not, the way we use Yammer is totally different than the way that Salesforce uses Chatter. They're pretty different that way. So there's some subtle things that we've done on the product that are pretty important. So in Chatter, the human-generated conversations and the machine-generated stories are all in the same feed. And because machines can generate stories a lot faster than humans, the activity stream really drowns out the human conversation feed.
You're killing Vic Gondotra at Google Plus there a little bit. He said the same thing.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you can't just have machine-generated stories appear in the main feed without it drowning out the human conversations. And so the reason you don't see just spontaneous discussions popping up in Chatter about topics unrelated to data is because it gets pushed off the page so fast, no one even has time to respond. So what we've done is we actually kind of learned from what Facebook went through, and they kind of iterated, and the solution that Facebook got to was the main feed is primarily for human conversations, and then they've got the separate thing, the ticker, where apps can just publish stuff into it, and it's real time, and you don't care so much about noise. It's kind of like ambient
awareness. Are you heading toward that model?
Yeah, we already have. So we in November.
I haven't seen this piece.
Well, so in November we added a ticker, which is this feed on the right that shows you what all of your coworkers are doing in their app. So obviously we take activity stories for Yammer. So when you do things like upload a new file or create a new page, which is kind of like our wiki, or save a new version of something, or follow someone or join a group, whatever, that creates an activity story. You can see it in the ticker. And we also allow third-party apps to publish into that. And so, like, for instance, the Yammer Salesforce connector publishes all those chatter stories into the ticker so you can get them there. We also just
so are you going to build an open graph for enterprises?
We already are. So we have an open graph API.
So what kind of apps are you going to need inside the company to shove data into, because on Facebook there's food spotting and Runkeeper and Spotify, all that stuff, and they're shoving data into the ticker. What are you going to need in your Yammer feed?
So we already have integrations with NetSuite, Box, SAP, which we did with an SAP developer called Freeboarders. They actually have a SAP Yammer connector. Again, you install it in SAP and it pushes those activity stories into Yammer. SharePoint, so we take all those SharePoint activity stories, move them in Yammer. There's startups like Badgeville, Spigot,
Ideation,
Expensify, and there's a bunch of other ones. There's new ones sort of adding all the time. So in the same way that you use your Facebook ticker to see what your friends are doing in terms of what music they're listening to, what articles they're reading, on Yammer you're seeing what they're doing in their enterprise apps, and it can be on Yammer, it could be in the third-party app.
Are you still seeing that the bleeding edge of this world is still being driven by the Zuckerbergs and the Twitters and the consumer apps, and then the enterprise guys are sort of drafting alongside that, or are you going to pitch some stuff into the world that the Facebooks of the world or the Googles are going to have to react to?
I think it's a good point. We're working on some stuff now that I think will be pretty cutting edge for any social network, not just an enterprise social network. So,
can you give me a taste of what you're thinking?
Well, I don't want to kind of
give me the TechCrunch story.
So what I would say is we're very focused on the problem of displacing email for the obvious reason that email is the main communication collaboration tool inside enterprises to a degree much greater than in your personal life. And so, for us to replace email, it definitely raises the bar on what a social network has to do.
Are you going to hook into Exchange or into Gmail or into
we integrate with Active Directory, which is sort of the company directory system. But no, I think our theory is that we can actually replace. So we're already displacing email, and we think we can push that much further. There are some things you have to do. I say in particular mail lists. Like Yammer groups are a much better way of attacking the problem of mail lists than I would say maybe even like a Facebook group would be relative to kind of in your like a personal mail list. It's just a different kind of problem. So we are doing some stuff there that you'll see us come out with.
Cool.
Yeah. So hopefully, we'll break some new ground there.
All right. So you were throwing the gauntlet down about Yahoo. So that's what a lot of people on Twitter were interested in talking about.
Yeah.
So you're pissed off at Yahoo because of the patents that they're trying to enforce against Facebook. Is that threatening to you? Because a lot of those patents covered literally everything in the social space, right?
Well,
if Facebook
my concern,
everybody could lose, right?
Yeah. So my concern isn't specifically about those patents. It's if Yahoo's behavior becomes the new normal in Silicon Valley. So if established tech companies, which have thousands of patents in their portfolio, I think Yahoo's got like 10,000, decide to enter patent trolling as a new line of business, and this lawsuit against Facebook is clearly the most opportunistic kind of patent lawsuit, filing on the eve of their IPO, just like a patent troll would, going after them for basically, one of their patents covers an e-commerce site with advertising. I mean, it's just the most broad sort of ridiculous kinds of patent claims. So if this becomes the new normal, then I think it does threaten every startup in Silicon Valley. It really could have a stifling effect.
It would embolden people like Steve Ballmer who have even more patents. I mean, I know one guy at Microsoft who has literally thousands. Just one guy has thousands of patents at Microsoft, right?
If every established tech company decided to enforce all of their software patents, it would pretty much end Silicon Valley as we know it. So unfortunately, the law permits these types of lawsuits. The only thing stopping it is potentially community outrage, which is what I've tried to muster against Yahoo, or companies' own internal sense that they won't engage in this type of thing. It's just bad for the ecosystem. Some sort of sense of integrity that there's some things they won't do for money.
Not only that, they'll open themselves up. If this whole world turns into a patent, all we'll have is lawyers working to see lawyers.
Yeah,
I mean, Microsoft has 803 lawyers. They have more lawyers than you have employees, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a great blog. There's just a great article published by a guy named, I think, Tim Lee, who's a lawyer writing about patents, and estimates that if software companies were really to try and figure out every single patent they might be infringing by